My son chose his wife's family, who called me a Mexican peasant, over me for the holiday dinner. I didn't waste time arguing. I signed off my $2,800 monthly support and watched the financial foundation of their perfect life vanish in a single silent transaction. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. My son looked at the marble coffee table I'd helped him buy, and then he broke my heart. Dad, unfortunately, you won't be welcome here for the holiday dinner. The words hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. My knees locked. I was standing in the living room I'd sacrificed my own savings to build. The silk curtains I paid for hung by the 12-foot Christmas tree. Every inch of this house bore my fingerprints, my sacrifice, my love for Marcus. What do you mean? Why wouldn't I be welcome? Marcus couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the marble tabletop, the scent of Sierra's expensive vanilla candles heavy in the warm air. He looked like he was bracing for impact. Sierra's parents are coming, and they'd prefer if you weren't here. My hands went cold. They'd prefer. Sierra's parents, Victor and Eleanor Thorne, the retired banking executive, and the woman who summered in the Hamptons. They'd prefer. It's just easier this way, Dad. You know how her family is about traditions. They have their own way of doing things. His voice got smaller with each word. I looked around the room. I saw the hardwood floors that had come from my second mortgage. I saw the crown molding that had maxed out my credit card. I saw Sierra's new professional-grade KitchenAid mixer through the kitchen archway. $2,000 of my money, probably used twice since October. Their own way, I repeated slowly. And what way is that, Marcus? He flinched. Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. I asked the question quieter than I intended. Where will I spend the holiday then? Marcus's face crumbled. Maybe you could, I don't know. Maybe visit Aunt Lena, or we could do something the weekend after. The weekend after. Like the holiday was just another appointment that could be rescheduled for convenience. I stood up, my knees protesting after 8 years of carrying this burden alone. I see. Dad, wait. But I was already moving toward the door, past the family photos where my face grew smaller and more distant in each frame. My hand found the doorknob, solid and cold under my palm. I did not look back. Son, I said without turning around, tell Sierra's parents, Feliz Navidad. The February air hit my face like a slap as I walked toward my truck. I heard Marcus call my name once, then the soft click of the door closing. Final. Absolute. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, engine off, watching the lights twinkle in the windows of houses I'd never be welcome in. My phone buzzed. I knew it was Marcus, already wanting to smooth things over with empty promises and guilt. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the key and drove into the darkness, leaving behind the warm glow of the house I'd bought, but would never belong in. The cold air hissed from the vents. The numbers started rolling through my head like a broken slot machine. $2,800 every month for 5 years. My old calculator had given up trying to make sense of the total last spring. $140,000, more money than Elena and I had saved for our entire retirement. Gone. Just gone. I pressed the accelerator harder than necessary. My truck responded with a growl that matched my mood. I drove past Willow Creek Drive. That was where I'd refinanced my house, Elena's and mine, to cover their down payment. The loan officer had looked at me with pity I hadn't recognized at the time. Mr. Flores, are you sure about this? You're putting a lot at risk for someone else's investment. Someone else's investment. Not my son's future, not my family's security. Someone else's investment. The thought twisted in my gut. I turned onto Cypress Avenue, past the bank where I had taken out a second mortgage when Marcus lost his job 2 years ago. Just temporary, Dad. Just until I get back on my feet. Sierra had stood behind him. $700 purse slung over her shoulder, nodding sympathetically while mentally calculating how much my desperation was worth. Nothing. My desperation was worth nothing to them. I pulled into my driveway, the one with the cracked concrete I couldn't afford to fix. The porch light flickered, another repair I'd been putting off. Inside, the house felt hollow without Elena's laughter. My phone rang as I fumbled with my keys. Sierra's name flashed on the screen. Perfect timing. I'd been waiting 5 years to have this conversation. I answered on the fourth ring, letting her wait just long enough to wonder if I'd pick up at all. Arturo. Her voice dripped with false sweetness, the same tone she used when asking me to cover their water bill or property taxes. I heard about the little misunderstanding with Marcus. Misunderstanding? I leaned against my kitchen counter. I don't think there's any misunderstanding, Sierra. You made your position quite clear. Look, I know this seems harsh, but you have to understand my parents' perspective. They're very traditional people. They expect a certain atmosphere during the holidays. A certain atmosphere, I repeated. And what atmosphere is that? I heard shopping bags rustling in the background. Well, they're not used to your kind of cooking, all that spicy Mexican food and loud music. And frankly, Arturo, they're educated people. They expect conversations about current events, literature, art, you know. The words hit harder than a physical blow. 8 years of biting my tongue, of swallowing insults for Marcus's sake. My kind of cooking. My voice stayed level, controlled. You mean the food you ate every Sunday for 3 years when money was tight? The tamales you said reminded you of your grandmother? That was different. We were appreciative then, but now with my parents, now with your parents, you can't have the Mexican peasant embarrassing you at your fancy dinner table. The false sweetness evaporated. Don't be dramatic, Arturo. This isn't about race, it's about class. My father graduated summa cum laude from Pacific State. My mother speaks 4 languages. They summer in the Hamptons. What exactly would you contribute to dinner conversation? Stories about laying tile? Heat flooded my chest, but I kept my voice steady. I built a business from nothing after your husband's grandfather died. I've employed over 50 people. I've paid more in taxes than your father made in his best year. Money isn't everything, Arturo. Breeding matters, education matters, and frankly, Elena understood her place better than you understand yours. The line went dead silent. She'd crossed it. The line I didn't even know existed until she'd stomped across it in her designer heels. What did you say about my wife? I'm just saying she knew how to blend in better. She didn't make waves. She understood that some spaces weren't meant for her. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. Elena had more class in her little finger than your entire bloodline will ever possess. Oh, please, she was a house cleaner who got lucky. At least she had the good sense to stay quiet about it. Sierra, my voice dropped to something I didn't recognize. I want you to listen very carefully. This conversation is over. We're done pretending to be family. You can't just, we're done, I repeated, and ended the call. I set the phone down carefully on the counter, my hands surprisingly steady. The kitchen felt different, smaller, but somehow cleaner, like a weight had been lifted from the air itself. I walked to my desk in the corner, pulled out the manila folder I'd been avoiding for months. Bank statements, mortgage papers, 5 years of automatic transfers that had bled me dry while they lived like royalty. Time to stop the bleeding. The documents spread across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. 5 years of bank statements, each one showing the same automatic transfer. $2,800 on the 15th of every month, vanishing from my account into theirs. A paper trail of my own stupidity. I pulled out my calculator and started adding. The first year, 30 through 600. The second year, another 30 out of 600. By the third year, I'd stopped buying myself new clothes. The fourth year, I'd started shopping at discount grocery stores. This year, the fifth year, I'd been eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch to make ends meet. $143,400. That wasn't counting the down payment, the utilities I'd covered when Sierra's shopping addiction got out of hand. Not counting the new roof, the landscaping, the furniture that was essential for their lifestyle. All of it gone. Poured into a house where I wasn't welcome for the holiday dinner. Elena's life insurance money, my retirement savings, the college fund we'd started for grandchildren I'd apparently never be allowed to see. I reached for my phone, scrolling until I found the number for my bank. This is Jennifer. How can I help you today? I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. Certainly, sir. I'll need your account number and some verification information. I rattled off the numbers. Jennifer was professional, efficient, with no judgment about why a 62-year-old man was canceling payments to what was probably his son's mortgage. I see the transfer you're referring to, Mr. Flores. $2,800 monthly to Riverbank. Account ending in 7423. How long have you been making this transfer? 5 years. The words tasted bitter. And you want to cancel it effective immediately? I looked around my kitchen at the outdated appliances I couldn't afford to replace, at the walls that needed painting. I had spent my home improvement money on someone else's castle. Effective immediately, I confirmed. Done. The transfer has been canceled. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, I said, surprised by how good the word felt. No, that's everything. I hung up and sat in the sudden quiet. Outside, the February darkness was settling over Riverton. For the first time in 5 years, next month's budget would balance. For the first time since Elena died, I could afford to fix my porch light, buy decent groceries, maybe even take a vacation. I gathered up the bank statements, the mortgage papers, all the evidence of my generosity. Then I walked to my fireplace, struck a match, and watched 5 years of martyrdom turn to ash. The fire felt warm on my face, warmer than I'd felt in years. My phone buzzed with a text message. I ignored it and poured myself a glass of the good whiskey, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to come. Tonight felt special enough. I raised my glass to the empty room, to Elena's photo on the mantel, to the man I used to be and the man I was becoming. Happy holidays to me, I said, and meant it. The next morning arrived crisp and clear, February sunlight streaming through my kitchen windows. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating how much money would disappear from my account in 3 days. Freedom tasted better than the Colombian blend I'd finally allowed myself to buy. My phone rang at exactly 10:47 a.m. Sierra's name flashed on the screen like a warning label. Arturo! Her voice carried that familiar tone of barely concealed impatience. I need you to pick up my parents from Riverton Airport. I set down my mug carefully. Sierra, did you forget about our conversation yesterday? Look, whatever that was about, we need to focus on practical matters now. My parents need transportation, and you're the only one with time during the day. The audacity was breathtaking. Less than 24 hours after telling me I wasn't worthy of sharing dinner with her family, she expected me to serve as their personal chauffeur. And you're asking me because? Because that's what family does, Arturo. They help each other. Her voice sharpened with irritation. Besides, let's be honest here. You're not my rival. You're too weak to be my rival. There it was, the final insult wrapped in a command. So just get in your truck and pick them up. What airline? I asked quietly. Aurora Air Flight 447. They'll be at baggage claim carousel 3. And Arturo, they're expecting someone who can handle their luggage properly. Don't embarrass us. I could hear her nails tapping against something hard. Of course, I said. I'll take care of everything. Good. And wear something decent. Maybe that blue shirt you wore to Marcus's graduation. They notice things like that. The line went dead. She hadn't even said thank you. I sat back in my chair, looking at my phone's blank screen. 2 RPM. Flight 447, Carousel 3. I glanced at the wall clock above my sink. 10:52 a.m. Plenty of time. I poured myself another cup of coffee, added an extra spoonful of sugar, and opened yesterday's newspaper. 7 across. Delayed gratification. 12 letters. The answer would come to me eventually. At 2:15 p.m., I was settling into my new recliner with a fresh cup of Earl Grey and the Riverton Herald Sunday edition. The crossword from yesterday lay completed on my coffee table. Delayed gratification had been postponement. My phone buzzed against the wooden surface. Sierra's name again. I let it ring. The February sun slanted through my living room windows. Today, the silence felt different, earned, intentional. 2:47 p.m. The phone buzzed again. This time I could see the preview of her text. Dad, where are you? My parents are... I turned the phone face down and returned to the sports section. The local team had lost again. Some things never changed. By 3:30, my phone had buzzed 6 times. I'd finished the newspaper, brewed a second pot of tea, and started organizing the junk drawer. Amazing what you could accomplish when you weren't rushing around serving people who considered you their personal bellhop. The seventh call came at 3:45. Instead of Sierra's name, I saw an unknown number. Probably her parents borrowed someone's phone at the airport. I let that one ring too. Outside, a neighbor was hanging lights on his porch, his children running around the yard with manic energy, normal families doing normal things. No one was stranded anywhere, waiting for someone who would never come. 4:15 p.m. My phone started ringing and didn't stop. Sierra, then the unknown number, then Sierra again. The buzzing became constant, like an angry wasp trapped against glass. I walked to my kitchen and unplugged my landline from the wall. Then, I turned my cell phone completely off. Perfect silence. I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich and heated up a can of tomato soup. Comfort food. I hadn't allowed myself in months because every grocery dollar had gone towards subsidizing their lifestyle. The cheese melted perfectly golden, the soup steamed in my favorite mug. The winter sun was already starting to set. Somewhere across town, 3 people were probably standing in an airport parking garage arguing about taxi fare and wondering how their personal servant had the audacity to strand them. The thought made my soup taste even better. By 5 p.m., I'd eaten dinner, loaded my dishwasher, and was considering what movie to watch. It had been years since I'd had an entire evening to myself without worrying about emergency calls for money or last-minute favors. I was reaching for the remote when someone started pounding on my front door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of aggressive hammering that rattled the frame and announced pure fury. I set down my tea and walked slowly toward the sound, already knowing exactly who I'd find on the other side. The pounding intensified as I approached. Through the peephole, I could see 3 figures crowded on my small porch, like wolves circling prey. I opened the door to find Victor Thorne's red face inches from mine. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted, pushing past me into my living room without invitation. "We waited at that goddamn airport for over 3 hours." Eleanor followed him, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her lips pressed into a thin line of pure hatred. "This is completely unacceptable behavior from someone your age, Arturo. Absolutely barbaric." Sierra brought up the rear, her designer coat wrinkled, her makeup smeared. "You humiliated us. Do you have any idea what you've done? My parents had to take a $40 taxi because you decided to get out of my house." My voice cut through their chorus of rage like a blade through silk. They stopped mid-rant, shocked by the steel in my tone. "Excuse me." Victor's face went from red to purple. "You don't get to make demands here, buddy. Not after what you pulled today." "This is my house," I said quietly, not moving from my position by the door. "And I want you out now." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension she'd perfected over decades of looking down on people like me. "Arturo, you clearly don't understand the magnitude of your mistake. My husband has connections throughout this city. Business connections, social connections. You can't treat people like us this way and expect—" "This was a lesson for you," I interrupted, meeting her gaze steadily. "A lesson about your excessive arrogance and your poor treatment of people you consider beneath you." Sierra's mouth fell open. "A lesson? Who do you think you are to teach anyone anything? You're nobody. I'm someone who finally stopped being your personal bank account and taxi service." I stepped aside and held the door open wider. "The lesson is over. You can leave." Victor jabbed a finger toward my chest but didn't quite dare touch me. "You have no idea who you're messing with, old man. I've been in this town longer than you've been breathing its air. I know people, important people, people who can make your life very, very difficult." "Is that a threat, Mr. Thorne?" "It's a promise." His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "You think abandoning elderly people at an airport is just something you can do without consequences? You're about to learn exactly how wrong you are." Eleanor nodded, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Indeed, actions have consequences, Arturo, and yours will be quite public." Sierra grabbed her father's arm. "Daddy, let's just go. This pathetic old man isn't worth our time." They filed out of my house like a defeated army, But Victor turned back at the threshold. "You'll regret this," he said. "I guarantee it." I closed the door behind them and turned the deadbolt with a satisfying click. 3 days later, I was enjoying my morning coffee and scanning the Riverton Herald when I saw my own face staring back at me from page 3. The headline read, "Riverton Businessman Abandons Elderly Couple at Airport During Holiday Storm." My hands went still around the coffee mug. There I was in black and white, an old photo from my company's website, probably 5 years out of date. Below it, a story that made my blood run cold and my temper flare in equal measure. Victor and Eleanor Thorne, visiting their daughter for the holiday, were left stranded at Riverton International Airport for over 4 hours Sunday when family member Arturo Flores failed to appear for a prearranged pickup. The couple, both in their late 50s, waited in frigid temperatures as a winter storm warning was issued for the region. Winter storm warning. It had been 52 and sunny. "We couldn't believe someone would just abandon us like that," said Victor Thorne, a retired Commerce Alliance Bank executive. "We called repeatedly, but Mr. Flores never answered his phone. We were forced to take an expensive taxi in dangerous weather conditions. At our age, this kind of treatment is not just inconsiderate, it's dangerous." The article continued with quotes about my pattern of erratic behavior and concerns about my mental state. Victor had painted himself and Eleanor as helpless victims of a cruel old man who'd suddenly snapped without provocation. No mention of the holiday dinner rejection, no context about Sierra's demands, or their years of financial exploitation. Just me, the villain who abandoned poor elderly tourists during a blizzard that existed only in Victor's imagination. I sat down my coffee and read the article again slowly, then a third time. The byline belonged to Vanessa Coleman, lifestyle editor. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the strategy. Victor had called in favors, used his banking connections to get this story placed exactly where it would do maximum damage to my reputation. Smart. Very smart. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a grudging respect for my opponents. They weren't just entitled trust fund babies throwing tantrums. They were strategic, calculating. They understood that in a small city like Riverton, reputation was everything. One well-placed newspaper article could destroy decades of hard work. They declared total war. I folded the newspaper carefully and set it aside, my mind already shifting into the methodical planning mode that had built my business from nothing. This wasn't about airport pickups anymore. This wasn't about holiday dinner or mortgage payments. This was about winning. I pulled out my laptop and began typing names into search engines. Victor Thorne, Eleanor Thorne, Sierra Flores, their social media profiles, their connections, their habits, their weaknesses, everything they'd foolishly made public over the years. If they wanted to play chess, I'd show them what a real strategist looked like. I glanced at my wall calendar. February 18th, 7 days until the holiday, 7 days to plan something they'd never forget. I spent the next 3 days living in a different world, not the world where I was Arturo Flores, the broken-down old man who let his family walk all over him. This was the world where I was Arturo Flores, businessman, strategic thinker, someone who'd built something from nothing and wasn't about to let a bunch of entitled parasites destroy what I'd worked 40 years to build. My laptop became Command Central. Victor Thorne, retired Commerce Alliance Bank manager, member of the Riverton Country Club, treasurer of the Inland Northwest Business Leaders Association. A man who'd spent his career in positions of trust and influence, a man with a lot to lose. Eleanor's Instagram painted a perfect picture of refined living, charity luncheons, wine tastings, vacation photos tagged with Nasi Blessed Life. Every post carefully curated to project success and sophistication, all built on other people's money, including mine. Sierra's social media timeline told the real story. Posts about our beautiful home with photos of the kitchen I'd paid for, check-ins at expensive restaurants during the months when I'd covered their utility bills, a status update from last week. So excited for holiday dinner with family. Can't wait to show off our hosting skills, our home, our success. The narcissism was breathtaking, but it was Marcus's work profile that gave me the final piece I needed. His recent activity showed a new connection. Vanessa Coleman, lifestyle editor at the Riverton Herald. The same Vanessa Coleman who'd written the hatchet job about me. I leaned back in my desk chair, looking at the evidence spread across my screen. These people had made three critical mistakes. First, they'd underestimated me completely. Second, they'd gone public with their attack, which meant I could go public with my response. Third, they'd documented their entire privileged lifestyle online, creating a perfect catalog of hypocrisy. I clicked through to Vanessa Coleman's profile. 43 years old, journalism degree from Pacific State, 15 years at local papers. A 5-minute search through local business directories confirmed my suspicion. 3 mutual connections between Victor and Vanessa's editor. The story hadn't just appeared. It had been planted carefully and deliberately. Amateur hour. I opened a new document and began typing. Not a response to their media attack, something much better. A timeline. 5 years of financial support documented with bank statements, receipts, and canceled checks. The down payment for their house. $47,000 from my home equity loan. The kitchen renovation, when Sierra decided granite countertops were essential. $18,000 from my credit card. 60 monthly mortgage payments of $2,800 each, $168,000. $250,000, more than I'd spent on myself in the last decade. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize, probably Sierra, trying a new angle. I ignored it and kept working. By evening, I had everything organized in a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. Bank statements, receipts, photos downloaded from their social media showing off purchases I'd funded. A printed copy of the newspaper article with my handwritten notes in the margins, documenting each lie and distortion. I looked at my wall calendar. February 24th was circled in red. Not because it was the holiday, but because it was the perfect day for justice. According to Sierra's social media events, they were hosting holiday dinner for 12 people. Family, friends, neighbors, members of their social circle. The kind of people who read the Riverton Herald and formed opinions based on what they saw there. The kind of people who deserved to know the truth. I closed my laptop and walked to my kitchen where I'd left my good camera, the one I'd bought years ago to document job sites for my business. Time to put it to work documenting something else entirely. Tomorrow was the holiday eve. Tomorrow, Victor Thorne and his family were going to learn what happened when you declared war on someone who actually knew how to fight. The holiday eve morning dawned gray and cold. Too bad I wouldn't be welcome at any warm house or family gathering, but I had other plans. I laid out my evidence like a lawyer preparing for trial, bank statements organized by year. Each monthly payment highlighted in yellow, receipts arranged chronologically, photos printed from their social media, Sierra's new jewelry, their vacation photos, the expensive decorations currently adorning the house. I'd helped them keep all of it. I copied the documents 12 times, one for each dinner guest. The newspaper article went on top of each stack. My red pen notes were visible in the margins, lie written next to Victor's quotes about dangerous weather, false beside the claim about my erratic behavior. Missing context highlighted where they'd failed to mention 5 years of financial support. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to Elena's funeral, pressed and ready for another kind of farewell. Today, I was saying goodbye to the man who'd been a doormat for his family. Tonight, I'd be someone who commanded respect. At 6:30 p.m., I loaded my briefcase with the evidence packets and drove to Kendall Yards. Their house glowed with warm light, cars filling the driveway and lining the street. Through the front windows, I could see figures moving around the dining room, Sierra playing hostess in the home my money had helped them buy. I parked across the street and checked my watch. 6:45. Perfect timing. Late enough that everyone would be seated for dinner, early enough that they'd still be on the main course. No easy escape for anyone. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Sierra loved to show off how safe their neighborhood was. I let myself in quietly, the warm air hitting my face along with the sounds of laughter and conversation from the dining room. I heard Eleanor's voice. "But darling, that's not how we do things in our family," followed by more laughter, our family, after everything they'd done to exclude me from it. I walked into the dining room carrying my briefcase. 12 faces turned toward me with expressions ranging from surprise to horror. Sierra froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. Marcus's face went pale. Victor and Eleanor looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Good evening, everyone," I said calmly, setting my briefcase on their marble sideboard. "I hope you don't mind me joining your holiday celebration." Sierra found her voice first. "Arturo, this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave immediately." "Actually," I said, opening my briefcase and pulling out the first stack of papers, "I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this dinner, this house, and this lifestyle you've been showing off." A woman I didn't recognize leaned forward with curiosity. "What is he talking about, Sierra?" "He's having some kind of episode," Sierra said quickly. "Marcus, call someone." But I was already moving around the table, placing a packet of documents in front of each guest. "Here are the bank records," I said conversationally. 5 years of financial support. $168,000 in mortgage payments alone, plus the down payment, renovations, furniture, appliances, everything you see around you. The room went silent, except for the rustling of papers as 12 people began examining the evidence. I watched their faces change as they absorbed the numbers, the dates, the undeniable proof of my generosity and their deception. "This is," one man started, staring at a bank statement. "Outrageous," finished the woman across from him. "Sierra, why didn't you tell us any of this?" Sierra's perfect composure was cracking. "It's more complicated than it looks. Arturo volunteered to help us. We never asked." "Actually," I interrupted, pulling out the newspaper article, "let's talk about what you did ask for and what you told the media about me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I placed copies of the newspaper article on the table, watching as the dinner guests recognized my photo. "Now," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence, "let's talk about the real manipulators in this family." Victor's face had gone from red to ashen. Eleanor sat rigid in her chair. "Mr. Thorne here used his banking connections to plant this story," I continued, tapping the newspaper. "Notice how I'm portrayed as unstable and dangerous, abandoning poor elderly people in freezing weather." A gray-haired man in an expensive sweater looked up from the article. "Victor, what is this about?" "The weather was 52 degrees and sunny," I said before Victor could answer. "And they weren't stranded tourists. They were Sierra's parents coming to the holiday dinner I'd been banned from attending because I wasn't good enough for their company." Eleanor finally found her voice. "That's not... We never said..." "You never said what, Eleanor?" I pulled out my phone where I'd screenshotted several of Sierra's social media posts. "That I was too low class for your parents. That my Mexican food and working class conversation would embarrass you in front of your educated friends." The woman I'd identified as one of Eleanor's charity friends shifted uncomfortably. "Eleanor, surely you didn't?" "He's twisting everything," Victor blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. "This man has serious mental health issues, the stress of aging, financial problems." "Financial problems?" I almost laughed. "Mr. Thorne, I've been supporting your daughter and son-in-law to the tune of nearly $3,000 a month for 5 years. The only financial problems here are the ones you're about to have." I turned to address the entire table. "These people have taken over $200,000 from me while calling me names behind my back. They've manipulated my son against me, banned me from family gatherings, and when I finally stood up for myself, they tried to destroy my reputation in the newspaper." Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, I didn't know about the newspaper." "Your wife knew," I said quietly. "And her parents orchestrated it. They turned me into a villain for refusing to be their personal ATM and chauffeur." The social dynamic in the room was shifting like tectonic plates. The gradual realization was visible in the guests' faces. "This is unconscionable," said an elderly woman in pearls, staring at the bank statements. "Victor, how could you let your daughter take advantage of this man's generosity, then attack him publicly when he stopped enabling it?" Victor's carefully maintained facade was crumbling. "You don't understand the full situation." "I understand perfectly," the woman interrupted. This man has been supporting your family financially while you treated him like hired help, and when he finally said no, you tried to ruin his reputation." Eleanor's voice came out strangled. "He abandoned us at the airport after you told me I wasn't welcome at holiday dinner because my presence would be inappropriate for your parents," I said calmly. "After 5 years of paying their bills while you looked down on me for my ethnicity and education level." The silence was deafening. 12 people were staring at Victor and Eleanor with expressions ranging from disgust to embarrassment. Sierra made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. "Everyone, please, this is a family matter that's gotten out of hand." "No," I said firmly. "This stopped being a family matter when you made it public, when you used the newspaper to attack my character, when you decided my reputation was acceptable collateral damage for your pride." I looked around the table at faces I didn't recognize, but who now knew exactly who I was. "I wanted you all to know the truth before you read about Arturo Flores in the paper again, because you will read about me again. But next time, it'll be the real story." I closed my briefcase and straightened my tie. "Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one I'll be paying for." As I walked toward the door, I could hear the eruption beginning behind me. Voices raised in accusation, questions demanding answers, the sound of a carefully constructed social facade falling apart. It was the most beautiful holiday music I'd ever heard. I moved to the front door, leaving the wreckage of their perfect evening. I knew my actions were public now, and the consequences would be immense. I heard Eleanor's sharp, panicked voice rise above the others. "Victor, what are we going to do about the payment?" The question hung in the air, a final punctuation mark on their defeat. I stepped outside, the cold air hitting my face. The house looked different now, the warm glow of the windows feeling less like comfort and more like a warning. I had destroyed their reputation, but I hadn't won the war. I had just escalated the stakes to a level where everyone could see the blood on the table. I drove away into the night, the dead silence in my truck a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. I knew the next round would be louder, and this time the consequences would be financial, and they would be real. I had secured my own financial freedom, but I had made a powerful enemy in Victor Thorne, and I knew he wouldn't just let his social standing crumble without a counterattack. The question was, what was he willing to sacrifice to save his reputation? I knew the answer was always more than I expected. I pulled into my own driveway, my cracked concrete seeming less like a symbol of my sacrifice and more like a sign of what I had finally reclaimed. I walked to my door, ready to face the next stage of the war. I felt a small, almost imperceptible tremor in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was the thrill of the fight, the first time in years I had felt truly alive. I opened my door, the silence of my empty house now feeling like a fortress. The game had truly begun. I knew that soon the phone would ring again, and this time it wouldn't be Sierra. It would be someone with a much bigger price tag. But for now, I sat down at my kitchen table, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. I still had the rest of the plan to execute, and I knew exactly where Victor Thorne was most vulnerable. I had only taken the first shot. Next, I would ensure that the public consequences he feared would be directed right back at him. I had until the end of the month before the second payment would be officially missed. That was my new clock. I opened my laptop, the screen reflecting my determined face. The real story was about to hit the paper, and this time, it would be my byline. I had exposed the Thorns, but Victor still held leverage in the city. I needed to cut that leverage, and I knew exactly how to do it. His old life was built on trust, influence, and the perception of unwavering respectability. I would take all three. I started digging deeper into his history at Commerce Alliance Bank. I needed an artifact, a smoking gun that wasn't just my word against his. The next few days were a blur of deep dives and cross-referencing. I wasn't just looking for petty gossip, I was looking for a pattern. And then I found it. A small, almost invisible detail buried in a decade-old annual report. A restructuring that coincided with a suspiciously large loan write-off. The details were complex, bureaucratic, and utterly damning. I printed out the report, the fine print a weapon in my hands. This was not about character assassination. This was about criminal malfeasance. The fight had just escalated from a social embarrassment to a legal hazard. The stakes were no longer a holiday dinner. They were Victor's entire legacy. I knew that going after his banking history was a massive risk. It would draw real attention, real power. But it was the only way to stop him from destroying me first. I smiled, a cold, hard curve of my lips. I was ready to pull the pin on the whole thing. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered by certified mail, with the weight of legal consequences behind every word. I signed for it at my front door, noting how the spring air smelled of new growth and possibility instead of the winter desperation that had marked those dark February days. Notice of default, the envelope read, final demand for payment. Inside, 3 months of missed mortgage payments had caught up with Marcus and Sierra like a tsunami of reality. $8,400 in arrears, 14 days to bring the account current or face foreclosure proceedings on the house I'd helped them buy. I set the letter aside and returned to my coffee, reading it the way you'd read news about distant weather. Interesting, but not your problem anymore. My phone had been ringing for weeks with increasingly desperate calls. Sierra's number was blocked after the first hysterical voicemail. Victor and Eleanor's social standing in Riverton had evaporated like morning mist after their holiday dinner humiliation. Even Marcus, whose calls I'd been ignoring out of a mixture of anger and curiosity about how long it would take him to swallow his pride. The answer, apparently, was 97 days. He knocked on my door that Thursday evening, no longer the confident man who'd excluded me from holiday dinner, but someone who looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 months. Dark circles under his eyes, his expensive suit wrinkled, the smell of desperation clinging to him like cheap cologne. "Dad," he said when I opened the door. "We need to talk." I stepped aside to let him in, noting how he looked around my house like he was seeing it for the first time. The new furniture I'd bought with my first mortgage-free paycheck, the fresh paint on walls that hadn't been updated in 8 years, the repairs I'd finally been able to afford now that I wasn't subsidizing someone else's American dream. "Nice place," he said quietly. "It's what happens when you spend money on yourself instead of people who don't appreciate it," I replied, settling into my new recliner. "Coffee." He shook his head, perching on the edge of my couch like he was afraid to get comfortable. "Dad, I need you to know how sorry I am about everything," he said. "Holiday dinner, the newspaper article, the way Sierra, the way we treated you." "Go on." "I didn't know about Victor planning that story. I swear I didn't." He ran his hands through his hair. "Jesus, Dad, the things they said about you behind your back, the way they talked about our family, about Mom's memory." My jaw tightened at the mention of Elena, but I kept my voice level. "And what exactly did they say about your mother?" "That she knew her place better than you knew yours. That she understood boundaries." He couldn't meet my eyes. "I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 5 years of mistakes filling the space between us. "The house is in foreclosure," Marcus said finally. "I know. We can't make the payments without." He stopped, seeming to realize how that sounded. "Without my help," I finished. "Without the money I was sending every month while you let your wife's family treat me like garbage." "I know how it looks, Arturo." I leaned forward, making sure he was looking at me. "Do you know how much money I sent you over 5 years?" He nodded miserably. Sierra calculated it after the holiday. The mortgage payments, the down payment, everything else. Over $200,000. $237,168, I corrected. I know the exact amount because I finally did something I should have done years ago. I added it up. His face crumpled. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it, son," I said. "That money is gone. But more importantly, those years are gone. 5 years when I could have been building a relationship with you instead of funding your wife's fantasy life." I know that now." He looked up at me with something that might have been hope. "But maybe we could start over. Maybe there's a way to. Are you asking me to resume the mortgage payments? The hope died in his eyes. We're going to lose everything, Dad. The house, Sierra's respect for me, her parents' approval. I don't know what I'll do. You'll figure it out, I said, not unkindly. The same way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The same way I learned to spend the holiday alone while you celebrated with people who thought I was beneath them. He started to cry then quietly, like a man who'd run out of other options. I lost you, didn't I? I chose them over you, and now I've lost you forever. I watched him for a long moment. This man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who'd let his wife's family convince him that his father wasn't good enough for their company. Marcus, you didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Is there any chance, any way you could forgive me? I forgave you months ago, I said, and meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen, or that I'm going to resume paying for a lifestyle that came with the condition that I be grateful for scraps of your attention. Then, what does it mean? I stood up and walked to my mantel where Elena's photo sat next to a new picture. Me with Aunt Lena and her family at Easter dinner. The first holiday I'd spent with people who actually wanted me there. It means that if you want a relationship with me, you'll have to build it from scratch. It means showing me respect instead of demanding I earn it. It means making choices based on what's right, not what's convenient. I turned back to him. And it means that the next time someone, your wife, her parents, anyone, tries to exclude me from family gatherings, you'll remember who actually acts like family. He nodded slowly, understanding perhaps for the first time that respect wasn't something you could take for granted. The house, he asked quietly, isn't my problem anymore? I sat back down, feeling lighter than I had in years. You're a grown man, Marcus. Figure it out like grown men do. Get a job that pays enough to cover your bills. Sell the house and buy something you can afford. Stop living beyond your means and expecting other people to subsidize your choices. He stood up slowly, his shoulders straight for the first time since he'd arrived. You're right about all of it. I know. He walked to the door, then turned back. Dad, for what it's worth seeing you stand up for yourself at holiday dinner, I was proud of you. Embarrassed and angry, but proud too. Good, I said. Maybe there's hope for you yet. After Marcus left, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey and stepped onto my back porch. Spring was coming to Riverton. The trees were beginning to bud, the air warming with promise. In 4 months, I'd be 63. Elena had been gone for 8 years. I'd wasted 5 of those years being a doormat for people who didn't appreciate sacrifice. I wasn't planning to waste any more. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Lena. Dinner Sunday. The kids want to show you their school projects. I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Real family, it turned out, was something you found with people who actually wanted you there. Everything else was just expensive theater, and I was done buying tickets to shows where I wasn't welcome on stage. The whiskey tasted like freedom, and the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. But the Thorne family wasn't done with me yet. Victor Thorne was an organized enemy. He had been a retired banking executive. That meant he understood paper trails, leverage, and the legal limits of harassment. He was going to use them. 2 weeks later, a new letter arrived. This one wasn't from a bank. It was from a law firm downtown. The envelope contained a formal demand letter. It claimed that during my 5 years of financial gifting, Marcus and Sierra had verbally agreed to a repayment schedule that totaled $237,468. The letter was a work of art, twisting my generosity into a personal loan, due immediately. The signature was for Thorne Family Trust, administered by Victor. I saw the lie for what it was, a panicked attempt to recoup money before the foreclosure wiped out their investment entirely. If they lost the house, they'd get nothing. If they successfully framed my payments as a loan, they could sue me directly. I called the lawyer who had handled Elena's will, a sharp woman named Ms. Alvarez. I summarized the claim in 2 quick sentences. They are trying to turn 5 years of automatic transfers into a structured debt, she confirmed. Do you have any documentation, any email, any text, any signed note that acknowledges these payments as a gift, not a loan? I thought back to the 5 years of casual, entitled expectation. No. Every time I asked for any formality, Sierra would call me dramatic. I only have the canceled checks and the bank's automated transfer memos. Then we have a fight, Ms. Alvarez stated. They have the leverage of their social standing and the perceived authority of a trust. You have the leverage of public truth. She suggested a preemptive move, a public statement reframing my relationship with Marcus. I didn't want to humiliate my son any further, but Victor was aiming for my retirement. Let's hit them where they are weakest, Ms. Alvarez, I said, looking at the bank report I still had on Victor's questionable write-offs. I need to shift the focus from my debt to Victor's career ethics. Is there a way to formally request an inquiry into his banking practices that relates to my payments? Ms. Alvarez went silent for a beat. That's a nuclear option, Arturo. We're talking federal regulators, not small claims court. But if you have genuine documentation of financial impropriety, even if only circumstantial, it could stop this collection attempt dead in its tracks. Victor Thorne will not risk his pension and reputation being publicly audited. I slid the printed-out report on the Commerce Alliance Bank restructuring across my desk. I want to send this anonymously to 2 places, the Financial Crimes Bureau and the Riverton Herald's investigative desk. Let the paper trail speak for itself. That is a price that cannot be easily paid back, Ms. Alvarez warned. If Victor gets wind of this, he won't stop at a demand letter. He'll find leverage over you. He already thinks he has leverage, I replied. He just doesn't know I canceled the main payment 6 months ago. I signed the legal release for Ms. Alvarez to begin an aggressive defense and preparation for a countersuit. My hand didn't shake. I was done being subtle. The fallout was immediate but unexpected. Victor Thorne didn't file the lawsuit for repayment. Instead, 3 days later, a second article appeared in the Riverton Herald, this time on the front page of the business section. The headline: Former bank executive Victor Thorne files defamation suit against local businessman Arturo Flores, citing emotional distress and calculated attack on good name. He had pivoted. He was trying to drain my finances through legal fees before the anonymous bank documents could surface. The emotional distress claim was pure theater, but it was expensive theater. I sat in Miss Eyes. Alvarez's office, the lawsuit documents stacked between us. He filed for $500,000 in damages, Ms. Alvarez said. He's using his former connections to rush this to a preliminary hearing. It's a classic SLAPP tactic, strategic lawsuit against public participation. He wants to shut you up, force you to spend every dollar you just saved. He thinks I'm the same broken man he saw in February, I said. He thinks he can bankrupt me. Can he? I looked at the number. $500,000. My life savings, plus the cash value of my house. If this goes to discovery, yes. We have to beat the clock, Ms. Alvarez. I need those documents on his banking practices to hit the press before he gets a judgment. I'm doing damage control now, she assured me. But Victor's lawyer is good. They've named Marcus and Sierra as key witnesses to your erratic behavior. They are going to testify against you. The betrayal was a sharp, cold jab to the ribs. Marcus and Sierra testifying under oath that I was unstable. I need a countermove, something that flips the script right before that hearing, I told her. Ms. Alvarez leaned forward. We have one option. Victor's claim is based on the alleged calculated attack at the holiday dinner. We can file a motion to compel discovery, demanding that Marcus and Sierra produce all financial communications between you, including texts, emails, and banknotes, specifically related to the payments prior to that holiday dinner. If those communications show dependency and repeated demands, the entire loan and distress claims fall apart. Do it, I said. Force them to produce the proof of their own greed. Let the court see the pattern. The hearing is in 10 days. She pushed a new file across the table. You have work to do, Arturo. You need to start documenting every single item you paid for in that house, itemizing the total $237,468. We need a ledger that even Victor Thorne cannot deny. I spent the next week cataloging 5 years of being an ATM. The granite countertops, the landscaping, the utilities, the credit card payments. Every single line item in the ledger was a tiny piece of Elena's retirement savings. It was a tangible map of my grief and their entitlement. The total remained $237,468. 4 days before the hearing, I received an anonymous email. Subject: bank file. Attached was a single high-resolution image of a confidential internal memo from Commerce Alliance Bank dated 5 years ago. It detailed the write-off Victor had orchestrated. The memo showed a clear violation of policy and a conflict of interest, directly benefiting one of Victor's social club friends. This was the smoking gun. It hadn't come from the official channels yet. It was leaked. I called Ms. Alvarez. The paper trail is in play. Victor knows he's exposed. He'll escalate now. She agreed. Expect an ambush before the hearing. He is cornered. The ambush came the next day, not from Victor, but from Sierra. I was outside, finally getting around to fixing the cracked concrete in my driveway. The repair was messy, concrete dust coating my work gloves, but it was satisfying. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Sierra stepped out. She was dressed impeccably, but her face was tight with stress, a deep crease between her brows. "Arturo," she said, her voice strained, "we have to talk about the lawsuit." I didn't stand up. I kept working the trowel. "You and Marcus are key witnesses. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Sierra." "Don't be like that. Victor is completely unhinged. He told Marcus if we don't testify that you're unstable, he'll cut us out of the Thorn Trust entirely. Marcus is terrified." She glanced toward the house, then back at me. "He's still hoping you'll pay the arrears, just the $8,400. He can stop the foreclosure and drop the lawsuit right now." The audacity was still breathtaking even now. She was offering me a financial ransom to betray myself and pay off their debt. "You're telling me you'd swear in court that I'm mentally unstable for the price of $8,400? I asked, meeting her eye. "It's just a temporary measure, Arturo. It's what family does. We'll pay you back once the trust is secured. You know, once Victor is calmed down." "You still don't get it, do you?" I threw the trowel down. It landed with a clang that echoed in the quiet street. "I don't want your money back. I wanted a son. You took both. Marcus is your son. He is sitting at home losing everything because you decided to be dramatic. And if you release that bank file, Victor will destroy you. He has enough leverage to ruin your business, Arturo." Her voice rose to a near shriek. I walked toward her slowly, letting her fear build. Victor Thorn is a retired bank executive. I am a man who built a business from nothing. His business relies on perception. Mine relies on concrete contracts and 50 employees. If his bank file goes public, his good name is gone. He will lose his trust, his country club membership, and his pension. His threat is a bluff. I stepped closer until I could smell her expensive perfume. Now, I have a choice. I can either pay the $8,400 to save my son's house and buy your silence, or I can let the foreclosure proceed and release the bank file on Victor Thorn. Guess which one cost me less in the long run? Her eyes went wide as she finally understood. I wasn't fighting for money. I was fighting for leverage. "You'll destroy Marcus," she whispered. Marcus destroyed himself when he decided his father's generosity was a weakness to be exploited. You and Victor have 10 hours before the deadline on that bank memo expires. Tell Victor if he drops the $500,000 defamation suit and agrees to publicly retract the first newspaper article, I will consider keeping the bank file confidential. You are out of time, Sierra. I turned my back on her and picked up the trowel, the concrete dust now feeling like armor. She stood frozen for a long moment, then got back into the black SUV. The door slammed shut, and she sped away, leaving a faint smell of burnt rubber on the quiet street. The next morning, the Riverton Herald's investigative desk received the anonymous email with the bank memo attached. Victor Thorn had not called back. He had not dropped the lawsuit. He had chosen to fight. I walked into Ms. Alvarez's office later that day for the defamation hearing. "The bank memo hit the wire an hour ago," she whispered. "The feds are looking at it, but we still have to attend this hearing. Victor's still demanding his $500,000. We sat across from Victor, Eleanor, and their expensive lawyer. Marcus and Sierra were at the back of the court, silent, looking terrified. The judge called the court to order. Before Victor's lawyer could speak, Ms. Alvarez stood. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss the defamation suit. Our client, Mr. Flores, has evidence that the plaintiff, Mr. Thorne, is currently under internal investigation for financial impropriety stemming from his tenure at Commerce Alliance Bank. The subject matter of this suit, Mr. Flores's calculated attack, is simply an attempt to silence a whistleblower and prevent the public exposure of a high-level banking scandal." She held up the thick ledger, documenting the $237,468. "Furthermore, we move to compel discovery. We demand that the key witnesses, Marcus and Sierra Flores, produce all evidence of communication proving the payments of $2,800 a month were ever intended as a loan rather than a gift." Victor Thorne's face was a study in pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at his lawyer, who was staring at the judge. The judge, seeing the headlines already buzzing on his assistant's phone, knew exactly what was happening. This was no longer a small-town spat. The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Thorne's lawyer, do you wish to proceed with this defamation suit given the circumstances?" Victor's lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. Victor cut him off, his voice shaking. "Your Honor, we move to voluntarily dismiss the case, without prejudice." The courtroom went silent. Sierra gasped audibly. I did not move. I did not smile. I only watched Victor Thorne. He tried to meet my eyes, and then his gaze darted away, fixed on the floor. He had lost everything to save face, and in the end, he had lost his face too. "Case dismissed," the judge stated. I stood, gathered my ledger, and walked past my son and daughter-in-law. Marcus's eyes were full of tears. Sierra looked completely empty. I looked at Marcus one last time, my heart aching with a familiar pain. "I hope you figure it out, son," I said quietly. "I truly do." I walked out of the courtroom and into the cool spring air. The newspaper vendors were already setting up on the corner, and I saw a new headline. "Banking Scandal Rocks Riverton. Former Commerce Alliance Executive Linked to Fraud." I didn't need to buy a copy. I already had the original artifact of my freedom, a signed letter from a law firm demanding $500,000, now worthless. The whiskey on the porch that night tasted like complete and utter vindication. The house was no longer hollow. It was a home. I had lost a son, but I had saved myself. The ultimate consequence was not for them, but for me. The absolute clarity that comes with knowing the price of everything and finally choosing my own value. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.